Hi guys, welcome back to Rabbit Hole Stories. I know we haven't done this sort of introduction in a while, but we thought we
We've
might
just
bring
been
it back a little
lazy.
bit. We've been lazy, to be fair. Get over yourselves. I don't care. But Joel and I, we just got off speaking with Oskar, who goes
Mhm.
by the Wise Rabbit. He's an environmentalist. You might have seen them on Twitter doing some protests in front of the ECB. He goes out every Saturday and he does a protest between 1 to 21 blocks in front of a bank in the hope that maybe he can get some dialogue with people, represent Bitcoin. And we kind of went kind of deep a little bit into a bit of a discussion. It wasn't a debate. There were sort of like opinions
Mm.
from all three of us on the space just now, just sort of interjecting our own sort of perspectives on environmentalism.
Yep.
Joel, what did you think?
I think it was good. I was honestly expecting it, in full transparency, to be worse. And I mean worse in the essence that, we would go back and forth. And I personally get very riled up about these just the climate change agenda in general. You'll see what I mean by this. I was also questioning a lot of the financing behind these things. And
Yeah,
to my
quite rightly so.
surprise, Oscar he was actually quite very open about it and he was aware of these issues. We also spoke about the way he wants to organize these protests in front of banks, how he
Hmm.
potentially saw Christine Lagarde. We don't know, but that was a funny fit in the episode. So there was a lot of stuff in there. Definitely a good one, and I don't want to keep it any longer. Have fun listening in, guys.
Oi, tip us some sats, guys, if you think there's any value in what
Yeah,
we
oi,
do as well.
oi,
Oi,
tip sets.
savaloi. See you later, guys.
See you later. Welcome back, everyone, to Rabbit Hole Story. Today we have an exciting guest, Oscar the Wise Rabbit, on. How are you doing, Oscar?
Oh, I'm doing very well. Very well. Enjoying my life outside the city at the moment at my
Oh, really?
grandparents' place.
Oh, nice.
Oh, we
Whereabouts are you in the world? Am I going to dox you, or are you going to dox yourself? Whereabouts are you in the world right now?
I'm based in Germany, close to Cologne. So, yeah,
Oh,
that's how
nice.
far we're gonna go.
And bro, is that a honey badger I see on your mic there?
It is. It is.
Lovely. I need to get one myself.
or we can
Yeah.
add the rabbit hole stickers. That would actually be good branding.
Yeah, no, mate, you're onto something there, bro. Oscar, mate, it's an honor, like Joel said, to have you on our show. Thank you for spending your valuable finite time with us here in this Bitcoin ecosystem that is the rabbit hole. And I'm keen to sort of hear about your journey through the rabbit hole. And seeing as that you're a wise rabbit and all, maybe we can just start with your Bitcoin rabbit hole story, my friend. How did you get into Bitcoin?
Well, how did I get into Bitcoin? I think first people are going there for greed and then they stay for the revolution. That was somewhat similar for me too. Um, I was always quite interested in money and savings, and I got interested into investing and stocks and ETFs and bonds during the Corona crash because I thought, wow, that was a good time to actually jump in. And yeah, I first started pretty classically with ETFs and quickly got bored of them and then got into stocks. And also I heard about cryptocurrency before and I wanted to dip in a bit and just try it out and put some money into Bitcoin. And then I just, let it run for some time. And I played around with a lot of stock options as well. I was in the GameStop Reddit hype basically, and this was beginning of 2021. And I had a big learning there because I was like, whoa, okay, the markets are heavily influenced and they're out of my control. So, um, because they stopped trading this stock at a certain moment when it was about to do a big short squeeze, and many people in Wall Street would have lost billions of dollars, and then they would like just suspend trading of it. And I was in there trying to sell my stock, and I was like, "Whoa, what the fuck? why can't I do it? Feels quite unfair. And at the same time, end of 2020, beginning of 2021, I visited a course on the Potsdam Institute for Climate. What is it? Yeah, I just know the German name actually, Klimafolgenforschung. I don't know, like what's happening with our planet, and I learned the geophysical facts that were happening, and I was like, whoa, shoot. We really have to change like society and the way we trade. Our economic system has to change a lot to actually uphold 1.5 degrees, which we signed in 2015. Like all nations unanimously signed that they wanted to limit global warming below 2 degrees and best 1.5 degrees. And while I was doing that, I was studying economics and business administration in Cologne at the university. And I was sitting in my lecturers for micro and macroeconomics for about seven semesters a piece, so 3.5 years every time I sat there, and I got into conflict with my professor about money, about why GDP is a good measurement of wealth for society, and why we can print infinite amounts of money and stuff, and they got not sufficiently answered. And at the same time, I had my Bitcoin laying in the bag, and I read about it. I read a lot from the beginning. I'm a guy that likes to read the original sources. So I went into the Bitcoin Talk forum and read a lot of pages in there from early 2009 to 2010, and I got fascinated by it. And then I remember one day I was sitting here and I was like, yo, I need to learn all about currencies and money, because I feel like this is a very, very big lever we can use as a global climate movement to change society. And, then I dabbled around ideas of creating a climate or a carbon coin myself, to reward people to sequester carbon, and having all these ideas about how money can be fixed. And then I found out about Austrian economics. And I went into my university and I looked for a professor to teach it there, but there was no one. So I had to look in the library, and I got out the old books from Ludwig von Mises and Hayek, and they actually had to take them out of the cellar for me. And they were like, bro, nobody ever rents out this stuff. How do you come up with that? And I was like, well, I'm curious about it. I want to read more into it. And then I just remember vividly that I was sitting in the library and having one eureka moment after the other. I wanted to shout out and put the books in front of every other people and be like, bro, you got to read this. This is way more logical than all the stuff we're getting taught. And yeah, this is how somehow Bitcoin dawned on me as a very, very, as a part of the solution to many of the problems we see in the world. This is like a general overview over my rabbit hole story.
So you kind of almost like discovered Bitcoin, and you went through the whole shitcoinery phase, which a lot of people do, including myself. And so you then got into the environmentalist interest after discovering Bitcoin, and then you fell down that rabbit hole since. Is that right? Or is that something historically you're interested in, or is it only because of Bitcoin now you're more interested in the environmentalist side? Or is that something you've always been kind of interested in?
Well, I've been aware that climate change is a problem earlier, but I didn't feel very powerful, like I thought, whoa, so much needs to change, but I don't know how to do this all by myself. And I got really frustrated and anxious about it, about the future. And then, like the more I learned about climate change and the more I learned about Bitcoin, it went like hand in hand a bit, because I got really deeply interested in what are big levers we can pull in the ecosystem and what are big levers we can pull in the economic system to help our planet heal, basically.
I understand. Would you be okay with me sharing my perspective on my rabbit hole of environmentalism, and then see if it matches yours? And then
Sure.
maybe let's meet in the middle. Maybe if there's any discrepancies or differences that we can talk through. And Joel, obviously, feel free to pipe in at any time as well. But for me, yes, like you, Oscar, I was aware of the narratives and the risk that the planet is undergoing due to climate change, and that's usually based on the fact that we're burning a shit ton of fossil fuels and we're flaring oil, and humans, in the way I see it, and the conclusion I've come to through this rabbit hole that I'm still in, is that over millennia the planet has gone through periods of warming up and cooling down, the ice age and things like that. And that's happened slowly and steadily over many, many thousands of years. So I still feel that there is that natural rotation of climate over many thousands of years. And I think as humans have become more technical and industrial, they've obviously sped up that process somewhat by burning all these fuels and things like that. So in my mind, I think yes, there is a natural timeline here, the way the planet heats up and cools down, but humans are speeding that process up. And we usually do that because we're incentivized in a fiat money system to use cheap cost that doesn't cost anything. They don't care about damaging the environment because it gets them the cheap plastic products that they need for consumerism. But under Bitcoin, I feel that we will be less consumeristic. We'll be spending less of our money, particularly in mining. We are incentivized to find the cheapest and most renewable energy types there are. And I know that with that incentive, only things can get better environmentally. So I'm just curious as to whether or not you see things the same, or whether you've got a different perspective that you want to share with us.
So I agree with you that the climate has changed naturally. It's actually due to the sun intensity. These are called Milankovitch cycles. So there was an astronomist who found out that the Earth kind of wobbles in the atmosphere, and there's different sun intensity. That's why we have ice ages. But we can forecast them almost infinitely into the future, and we can look into the past and to the ice cores and see, these cycles. They're about approximately every 46,000 years. And through thousands of years, we see the Earth heating up after the ice age, approximately 2 degrees. And then we've been in a relatively stable climate for almost 10,000 years now. So since human settlement and civilization began, and domestication of animals, we have been in a fairly stable climate. It's been like really, really stable. But now, after burning huge amounts of fossil fuels, we've broken out of that in rapid fashion. And this is really like, this is basically a huge global experiment we're doing with the planet. And there's no denial that 99.98% of the heating we see at the moment is man-made. And also, the sun intensity in the last couple of years actually kind of decreased a bit. So we're probably even 102% of the heating we see is made by us. And I feel we have the responsibility for ourselves and our future generations to leave them with a livable planet as we inherited it from generations before us. And that's why we need to change our lifestyles accordingly. And I believe Bitcoin, and that's where we meet again, is a very, very powerful tool to change your own incentive structure from spending and consuming to saving and just looking for long-term value.
Joel, what about you?
Maybe I'm the pessimist in the group, but I don't see I don't see it man-made as everyone on planet Earth. I see it 5 countries made, and that's the US, China, India, Brazil. And I think in terms of output with coal, the UK is also quite high up there because we're still a heavy coal country that uses a lot of fossil energy, on addition of being an island with like all of the mishaps you have there. So we, on the one end, burn fossil energy, which is not good for the heating up part. And then on the other end, we're actually pretty bad with getting rid of the waste and all of that stuff. A lot of the aftermath that lies around, and also pollute our land in the meantime. So it's not just the atmosphere, but also the ground that's been heavily poisoned at this point in the UK. But I think it's these 5 countries, and it kind of leads into my questions, which is why I am fed up with the, and I'm going to call it climate change agenda, not with the term climate change. Because if you actually, or at least it was this way when I was in school, the term climate in itself is already the definition of an ever-occurring state at a place of time when you measure it that can change based on outside behaviors. If you got a heat and a cold front, and you get all of these things that you basically learn in, what was that, 8 years or 9th years biology classes, you get these different kind of weathers essentially. What I'm a bit fed up with the agenda is they're using something which is a real danger, and if I'm saying they, I'm speaking of centralized authorities. You could call it the EU, you could call it the White House, whatever works for our listeners, and they're abusing that to basically sneak in draconian plans. And maybe people see it in the video recording. I was kind of, what's that in English? I was kind of doing this with my nose when Oskar spoke about the 1.5 degrees heating up, because this in my book as well is theoretically been based on research that has been financed by a lot of the centralized authority. And in the back of my head, this just goes, okay, in the name of science, can we also find people that are a bit maybe less biased to that central authority? Because I'm not denying the fact that there's change happening. I'm just very skeptical of the data that's presented by the central authorities. I think with good cause. Look how they fucked up the fiat system, and it just kind of worries me that they're also using these things. So this is where my issue is in. But this leads into my question, Oskar. Do you think if, let's take Europe as an example, we do have the EU, sorry UK listeners, you were part once, and
how
there
dare
are,
you, Joel?
yeah, I have to take it in there. There are different countries, obviously, with different footprints. I came out of Switzerland. We were pretty neutral, maybe just on the edge of being carbon emissionable. Then you have countries like, I think Germany has a higher output, but they also burn more fossil fuels. And I sometimes think it's a bit unfair that these centralized authorities in Brussels put down the hammer and go, right, we'll introduce something like a climate score, for example, and will basically punish people who might as well already be, working pretty hard on reducing their footprint and all of these things. And I then go, okay, instead of having one authority from the top, we could have multiple authorities, like a country with different, states and different councils and these kind of things. And every one of them can actually, based on their own data, improve their life standard. Do you think a more decentralized approach like this would actually lead to a faster, better result instead of that centralized planning? Or am I missing something there? Because I'm always in that question mindset, like, if they already fucked up stuff like money with that centralized approach, aren't they doing the same thing now with the agenda as well?
Oh, definitely. I completely agree with that. I believe there is no value in central planning because it basically diminishes the decentralized intelligence of individuals. So I believe individuals can plan more efficiently and more effectively for themselves and group themselves into interest groups and fulfill their goals instead of someone from above saying, okay, this needs to be done. We all have to do it like that. That's why we end up fighting each other over who has control over everybody else, because nobody likes to be told what to do. I believe that's actually a very powerful way of Bitcoin. It's a voluntary system, everybody can choose to adopt it, or they can just, let it pass for some time. And that's why everybody who's in the community is so into it, like we're in the rabbit hole. We're never going out of it. We're like, whatever happens, Bitcoin can be banned from government. It can be made illegal. Well, we just do it underground. We'll do our underground radio shows, and that's why I said, I joined for the greed and I stayed for the revolution.
We also had Margot on in March or April, I think it was, right, Ian?
Yeah, it's about that time.
And that episode to me was quite eye-opening because, again, I came in like, I don't want to call myself a climate denier or anything, but, I have a very skeptical view of the way these issues are being presented. Maybe also with my media background, because I used to, write a ton about finance, and suddenly your publication gets published, gets sponsored by the people you actually write about, you can't write about.
Cool.
Yeah, so you had these influences in there. But she mentioned that in her mind, a lot of the issue is also in academia. And it's interesting with your climate impact research you did, that study you did there. She mentioned that there's actually a lot of research also being done independently because people were simply cast out. She mentioned, was it one or two professors who were just raising the questions like, hey, maybe this crazy idea you all deemed crazy is actually not crazy if we find the right model to test it, which they were able to do, but they got completely shadow banned everywhere. And she mentioned that a lot of that could be down to improving the academic system. And you having mentioned in your rabbit hole story that you also had this clash. Do you think, especially with stuff like Fridays for Future, that if you maybe would make something like Bitcoin a curriculum, where you go like, right, this is how it's been brought up, cypherpunks led into Satoshi and all of these things and the early days, and they actually have to read the Bitcoin Talk Forum. Do you think that would also improve the way things outside of Bitcoin are taught, especially maybe in regards to physics and climate research?
I do believe so, yeah, because the rabbit hole journey teaches you how to think independently and critically. And if we can teach more people how to do that, I believe it's a overall plus for society in general. The more independent thinkers we have, the more fruitful discussions we will have, and the more insights we will gain from them. However, I wanted to talk about the thing you mentioned with research getting funding from the institutions that we're kind of fighting. And I believe, the incentive system in money is obviously fucked. Like there's no denial in that. However, I believe that the IPCC is a fairly decentralized approach to climate impact research. There are researchers from all over the world coming together, and there are three groups in that. Group A and B, they're doing diagnostics. They're basically saying, okay, this is happening to our planet, this is the data, CO2 concentration in the atmosphere from Mauna Kea, or ice cores, or Arctic sea ice expansion, whatever it is. There's a huge amount of data. They just put it together, say this is happening. And then there's group 3, and they're not doing diagnostics, they're doing therapy. And they're basically in this centralized authority mindset, how the world works right now. And they're saying, the world works right now like this. These are the measures we have to take to make it different. But it's always a centrally planned approach.
Is this the same group where people like the Aspen Institute and all of those are in? Because I actually read the IPCC reports, and if you read the data part of it, you go, okay, there's no mention of, on Bitcoin Twitter, for example, they always say like, we're gonna reduce fossil fuels. There's actually no mention of that at all in the data side of things. They just say we're aware, we're in a transition period and all of that stuff. And then it's always, I think, the Aspen Institute, which is very influential in the IPCC group. For those of you not in know, the Aspen Institute is basically financed by a bunch of billionaires who all, funnily enough, have always invested into companies who are the solution for these kind of things. And I know that they are very much the devil in there, who go in and say, if you don't do this, we'll cut you off. Do you happen to know if there's also other institutes like this in that third group?
I don't.
Oh shit, okay.
Actually.
Well, maybe you'll find it out and I can link it in the show notes.
Yeah, probably. Like I would have to do a bit more research in that, but I also believe, or I don't necessarily have to believe that, but since the 70s, there's an extensive amount of research funded by big oil and big coal industries to deny or to postpone action on climate change. This is like research funded by tobacco industry about the health impacts of smoking. And I believe these doubts they sow into our minds are very effective, because basically our message as climate activists and as Bitcoiners are, you as an individual, you need to change. And change is hard, We love the way we are. We prefer sitting down. And if there's somebody else who just sows a bit of doubt into our minds about this change being actually necessary and bringing us long-term value, then we'll be like, I'll like my chair. I'll stay where I am. And this is very dangerous, I believe.
Have you ever heard about the big 5 oil company stories with nuclear?
Tell me about it, Joe.
We had Alana on a couple of weeks ago, and she mentioned this in passing. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And the thing was basically in the 70s and 80s, and I particularly researched it in Switzerland because that's where I got the closest connection with from having lived there all my life. Big oil financed a lot of the core anti, we need to build out nuclear things and stuff, organizations, because they knew if we just plant enough fake evidence, so to speak, in this now older technology, and bear in mind, back then it was already 20 years since sort of the mainstream nuclear thing started to roll out, that they managed to keep nuclear so low and also keep money out of nuclear to actually improve it, because these days if you have a nuclear site, I think it has emissions exactly in the beginning, and then you have no emissions at all, and even the emissions in the beginning you can offset within the first 10 years. If I'm not mistaken, it could be more or less. But they managed to keep basically investment into this emerging technology, which we as Bitcoiners know, holy shit, if you use it right, this thing runs for an eternity, free energy essentially for eternity. That's great, right? And they managed to basically support stuff like Greenpeace, for example. We also know how much they get influenced by Ripple and such, to never ever get money into that industry again. And I read a book, it's called the Play in Shadow with the Big Five, and you actually saw the telegrams and the faxes back in the days of Shell executives writing with BP executives and making fun of the nuclear researchers who were there presenting like, hey, look, if we do this, we reduce the heating of the planet by like 0.8 degree, which is amazing when you go into the details and such. But just because they were so greedy of having contracts with localized economies and these kind of things in the oil industry, they basically were able to keep it under wrap to this day, more or less. In the last 5 years, I would say, they nuclear managed to break out because the security, surrounding nuclear reaction explosions and these things has improved massively. But it's crazy. They just planted seeds. They unfortunately also paid off Greenpeace and such. And when I read this, I went like, oh my God, this is the same thing as, Skull of Satoshi with us, where they claim we're so much polluting the planet, when I would argue Bitcoin mining is probably the greenest solution out there if you compare it to anything else in the industries. And if you actually also read that book with these big five oil companies, you start to realize like, oh wow, there's a big pressure on the whole, basically on the whole research side of things. But I don't want to take time from you with the episode. I'm rambling a bit.
No, I'm actually like I totally agree. What this boils down to again is the fatal flaw in centrally giving out money. Because imagine, like, I believe there are many more individuals in the environmental movement who support nuclear energy. Like Greta Thunberg herself said that it was a terrible mistake of Germany to get out of nuclear and instead fire up those old coal plants until 2030. So, what this boils down to me is like FUD is very effective, and centrally giving out money instead of letting individuals allocate money to the projects they're interested in and they want to see progress in is highly immoral, illegal. I'd say, this is criminal. What about you, Ian?
I'm just thinking how deep and vast this environmentalist rabbit hole really is, and how complicated and nuanced and confusing it can be, because obviously we are fed with information from scientists, and now you've got to throw into question, what is science? Where is it funded? Where is that narrative coming from? What is the end agenda from the elites and things like that? And as long as there's fiat money, we're going to have continuous ongoing pollution. Yes, they might be talking about this ESG situation, but all they are doing, just like other parts of the fiat system. They're just using it to profit and make more and more money for themselves. But also, I'm thinking about a little bit about Alex Gladstein's report on the IMF and the loans that they give out to developing countries. And when I was talking, Joel, earlier about we as humans are contributing to pollution and potentially speeding up the process of climate change. And I do agree with you, it is the likes of the West, like the US and also China as well, and the big boys in the game. And you've got the US lending out money to certain regions of the world, dictating that they should now change their entire landscape, change their farming practices in order to, and I think the example Alex brings up is in Bangladesh, I think, Joel, yeah, okay, where they actually have to flood fields that would ordinarily been farmed for something else or to raise cattle, but they flooded these fields with water to actually produce shrimp, which will be shipped out to the West. And that's part of the conditions of the dirty loan that they were given, that they can never pay back. So environmentally, that's going to have an impact as well. And as long as we have a system like that exists, we're in trouble, and it's just a one-way street into further damaging the planet and changing the landscape and putting these scars across the planet that, you know, in some cases might be irreparable.
Definitely. I feel like also people haven't really understood the consequence of irreversible change that is happening. You know, like tipping points we're talking about in Germany, like I think in the UK it's Just Stop Oil. They're doing something fairly similar to
They're pissing
gen-
everyone off in the morning, basically.
Well, yeah. They're pissing everyone off in Germany as well.
Yeah. And I think this is a shame, because to me this is also a result out of frustration. I mean, what do we do?
There's a big need, I feel
obviously, but what do we do as Bitcoiners if we're pissed off? Okay, we don't start burning down banks, but we put up stickers, for example. And I think there has to be a middle ground. And this kind of actually leads nicely into what you've been doing during the summer with your protest in front of the ECB, but what you're generally encouraging also on Saturdays. What's that all about, Oskar? Can you maybe tell us a bit?
So, yeah. Well, last year, I was getting more and more frustrated about, nothing happening. And I felt like, okay, I have a very powerful tool on my side that I've acquired a lot of knowledge about. I need to raise awareness to the problems I see, and I need to teach my fellow climate activists how to use this tool effectively to fight for their goals. And I set out to do so by firstly challenging myself to live on a Bitcoin standard, like only paying in Bitcoin and only being paid in Bitcoin, because that's the end goal. That's where we want to go to. And I have this quote from Mahatma Gandhi in my mind, which said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." So before I asked my fellow citizens to join me in that journey, I had to find out if I can actually do it myself.
If you don't mind me asking, what do you do as a day job? Do you freelance? Do you also work in the climate research department, or?
I would say I'm mostly an activist and adventurer. I'm living from donations and trying to do workshops and seminars on Bitcoin, on teaching that. But, it's like slowly but steadily. So, yeah, I did that. And it's a tough challenge to be like 100% Bitcoin within our society. But people sometimes people, when you just ask enough people, they're like, okay, I won't support you by accepting your money. For example, I traveled like 3 months by train through Europe. And this was the days of deflation, my Bitcoin only challenge. And there was this one time, it was 22nd of March, no, May, this year, Bitcoin Pizza Day. And I wanted to find a pizza in Naples, which I can pay in Bitcoin. And I think I was at, let's say, 20 restaurants asking if they would accept my money, which was Bitcoin, and give me a pizza. But they were all like, nah, we can't do this. Our boss is not here. We don't accept it anymore. There were, I think, 3 pizza shops listed on BTC Maps, and I went there first, but they were all like outdated. And then in the 21st pizzeria I was like, bro, I'm so hungry. I've been walking around the city for 3.5 hours now asking for pizza and buying in Bitcoin. And this guy, he was like, well, I won't accept your money, but appreciate your dedication. You'll get a pizza from me. Just choose one. And I believe this is, I really learned that if you have the drive and you really want to push for change within yourself, there will be someone in society who's inspired by that and will try to help you out if you're gonna ask for that. And after this challenge, I went back home and I was like, how did Greta Thunberg start her protest and raising awareness for climate action? And she did that by doing a 3-week sit-in in front of the Swedish parliament in Stockholm and doing the school strike for klimatet. And, well, I thought, from the best thing I know, we need to strike money and take it into our own hands. And the institution that is printing money in Europe is the European Central Bank. And then from August 1st, which is Bitcoin Independence Day, till August 21st, which is Bitcoin Infinity Day, I had a 3-week sit-in myself in front of the European Central Bank, raising awareness to the problem I saw in fiat money and the potential solution I saw in Bitcoin. And since then, every Saturday, I'm going out and I sit in front of a bank for 1 to 21 blocks, and I'm raising awareness for Bitcoin and for the climate as well. So it's like, it's maybe a bit provocative to say, but I'd say it's Fridays for Future and effective.
Are you getting much interest from people, or curiosity from people when you're sat there protesting? Does anyone come up to you asking you any questions?
Oh yeah, people are always interested, They're like most people, they ignore you. They see you, they got an impression, they read your sign and they talk about it, but they don't want to talk to you because they don't got time. They have other problems. And some people laugh at you. A few people come around and they fight you with their arguments, whatever they have, Bitcoin FUD. And some people you win over, like I remember this one guy from Frankfurt, Klaus. I sat with him in front of the European Central Bank, and he approached me. He still had his earplugs in. And after like 5 minutes talking, he was putting them out and was like, oh, I'm sorry. This seems like an interesting conversation. And I think he stayed there for 2.5 hours the first day. And he went away, and I was like, Oskar, this has been the best conversation I've had in half a year or something.
Mm. Mm. And it's only takes one conversation really, and then that can migrate into other arts as well. So that's very fantastic. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see QR codes below with open tip, and just ping us some lightning. And Oskar, I was thinking of you and some of the videos I've been seeing. Maybe you should put a QR code on there, maybe with a lightning address or something like that, that people can walk by and zap you some sats as well. That might be an interesting sort of conversation starter as well.
Oh yeah. I thought about like doing a faucet maybe, getting a QR code on my sign, and then like people walking by and be like, here, take some free sats,
Yeah, that's a great idea.
You'll get all the Bitcoiners in the area to come by.
Yeah, they're coming by anyways because they're like, oh, a Bitcoiner in the wild. That's nice. We need to support that.
Have you ever then encountered issues? Because I know in Frankfurt you've been. Was it arrested, or they gave you like a like house arrest or something to do not be on the permit anymore? But did you also have issues with, like, just call it your regular bank in a regular city somewhere, that employees came out and actually spoke to you?
No, usually it's Saturday, so there's nobody working in a bank on Saturdays.
Yeah, sorry. I was going a bit too far. Well,
that's because mate, you're confused because Bitcoin is 24/7, so I can understand.
That could be the thing.
Yeah, that's fine.
But in Frankfurt, you got in some trouble, if I dare say so, right?
Yeah, so I was the first 11 days or 10 days, I was sitting on the stones in front of the central bank, which was central bank property. But they were like, as long as it's just you and a sign and you stay peaceful, we accept you being there. And then on the 11th day, I felt a bit more provocative, and I had this big FCK ECB sign. And this is just facts that happened. You have to draw the lines yourself, but for me it was like somewhere in midday there was a Maybach, like a really expensive car, driving very, very slowly in front of me, and like 2 hours later or 1.5 hours later, the security guy came out and was like, you can't sit here anymore, you have to be out front. And I was like, well, if the people who called you come down themselves and tell me, I'll be out in no time. But so far, you've accepted me here for 10 days. I'm going to be here another 10 days. Why should I go now? But then it was like 4 or 5 minutes later, 2 police cars showed up and, showed me the force of the state, basically. Which was kind of traumatizing in that moment, because I felt like I did nothing wrong, I just expressed my views. I knew it was quite provocative, but I am not sure if there's anything illegal in that, and
especially in Germany, where we still have, a right to a right to demonstrate, which they like. Sometimes they turn it off.
Well, for now.
Yeah. They like to turn it off and on again, based on whatever it is. But we also have a right of expression, and in both cases, it fits what you did perfectly. But I bet do you think it was Christine Lagarde driving by that Maybach? I'm just curious now. If the boss himself on the side.
Sure. I'm not sure. I would have loved it.
It's so funny.
I can imagine her hanging out the window. Which colour of euro would you like?
Brilliant, brilliant. But, who knows? Those police officers, or even the guy you spoke about previously, who you spoke to 2.5 hours, eventually all roads lead to Bitcoin, and they'll end up either discovering it, taking their time, or they'll flat out ignore it, and they'll maybe get it at a later time. But this also leads nicely into the closing segment on our show, and we like to finish the show a bit with a challenge for our guest. Very easy challenge, so you don't have to explain something super. Cool. And we want to prove that all roads actually lead back to Bitcoin. So we do give our guests a word, which is, it could be totally random, associated with you, whatever came up during the episode between Ian and myself. And they have to somehow prove that that word, topic, or the field that that word is in relates back to Bitcoin. And if you have nothing, no idea to come up with, you could always come to something else. Cool. So the word we came up with you was cake. How does cake relate back to Bitcoin?
Oh, I love it. I love cake.
Yes.
You know, actually, this is quite a personal story because my mom, she bakes cakes for a living.
Cool.
And it's really hard. Hard-earned fiat money. And, you know, I'm trying to be a good son to her and say, like, you know, you should... I have some very interested Bitcoiners around me who would be interested in buying cake and chocolates and pay for them in Bitcoin. Wouldn't that be something to support your business? And I feel like, you know, she knows a lot of vocabulary now, which I'm very proud of. But she's still very hesitant, and I feel like there needs to be another person that tells her basically what I told her, because I feel like I'm not going to be the one, and I've started to accept that. But yeah, I think that's how cake relates with me to Bitcoin, and whenever I get a birthday cake now, I'll make sure that it's getting a Bitcoin topping on it. Like, for example, next birthday, pretty sure it's going to be this honey badger on a cake.
That sounds like a perfect cake. And if Oscar's mum, if you're listening, I like cake too. So feel free to, if you want your first, Bitcoin transaction for cake, then hit me up, and I'm sure we can sort something out. But yeah, thank you for your answer on your all roads lead back to Bitcoin with cake. I was kind of thinking about when Joel said cake, I was thinking of layers. So like a layer cake, the Bitcoin layer, layer 1, layer 2, and all that kind of stuff. But that's where my mind goes with things. But I do like your answer, Oscar. Thank you again for joining us here at Rabbit Hole Stories. Thank you for delving down a little bit of the environmentalist and discussion that we had around environmental issues and things like that. I think it's important that we continue having a conversation and sort of like don't trust, verify, and sort of check each other's perspectives and things like that. Because while we're all down here in this rabbit hole, sometimes there are shadowy areas that we haven't quite seen yet, and it's good to sort of share those narratives together in the Bitcoin ecosystem so we can get a full, better picture of where we all are. So I'll leave you alone, Oscar. Thank you so much for joining us, Oscar the Wise Rabbit. All these details are in the show notes below or anywhere that you might be listening to us. Joel, is any closing statements you want to make?
No, also thank you from my end, and I guess the best place to find you, Oscar, is on Twitter or Nostr?
It's probably going to be Nostr, Bluesky, and Mastodon in the future, because I will set back from centralized social media. It's not very good, but you can check out my YouTube if you want to see the Climate Punks manifesto, for example.
Oh, cool.
Piece of art in front of the European Central Bank. And yeah, guys, thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation with you guys. I really enjoyed it. And Ian, keep doing podcasts. Your voice is just, it's magnificent.
He's got a good voice, yeah. Good radio voice.
Yeah, I've got a good radio voice. Forget the face. But yeah, thank you, Oscar. Mate, take care, and I'll see you soon.